At the heart of Chicago, in 1893, a vanished city of over 200 gleaming palaces rose almost overnight, then disappeared without a trace. Official records claim 30,000 workers built this white city in just 27 months, using little more than plaster and steel. But the scale, the missing construction photos, and its rapid erasure fuel a conspiracy. Was the World's Fair hiding a forgotten civilization? The real story starts when you ask how an entire city could look so permanent and then simply vanish. Congress granted approval for the World's Columbian Exposition in April 1890, but the real momentum began later that year, when Burnham was named Director of Works. Burnham faced an unprecedented task: transform Jackson Park, a sprawling tract of marshy lakeshore, into a showcase city in just over 2 years. The organizing committee assembled a core team of architects in Chicago by January 1891, setting the stage for one of the largest construction mobilizations in American history. At the peak of activity, records show as many as 30,000 workers on site. Laborers, craftsmen, and specialists arrived daily, many recent immigrants drawn by the promise of steady wages. Burnham ran the project with military precision, dividing the site into zones and assigning foremen to oversee each area. The work unfolded in parallel, not in sequence. Grading and foundation crews advanced on one end of the park while steel workers and carpenters erected the first frames elsewhere. This command system, rigid, top-down, and relentless, was the only way to keep pace with the schedule. Speed alone could not solve everything. The fair's backers knew that traditional masonry construction would take too long and cost too much. Instead, they approved a policy of temporary architecture for most buildings, allowing the use of lightweight, fast-to-assemble materials. Burnham's team adopted modular strategies. Wall panels, decorative elements, and even entire sections of ornament were prefabricated in shops around Chicago, shipped by rail, and assembled on site like a kit. This industrial approach, backed by a budget exceeding $20 million, meant that dozens of structures could rise at once. The numbers are staggering. Over 200 buildings completed in roughly 27 months across nearly 700 acres. Each month brought new foundations, new frames, and new facades. The official timeline, daunting on paper, became reality through a combination of industrial logistics, relentless oversight, and the labor of thousands working in shifts. Burnham's vision was clear: build not for forever, but for spectacle, and make it happen on time. The illusion of stone was achieved with a material called staff, a clever blend of powdered gypsum, cement, and jute fiber, sometimes mixed with horsehair or other additives for strength. This mixture poured into molds produced shells about half an inch thick. Once dry, these panels were nailed to a skeleton of wood or iron, then painted in shades of white or cream. The result was a surface that looked like marble from a distance, but was, in truth, a fragile skin. Staff was cheap, fast, and easy to shape into ornate forms, such as cornices, pediments, and entire statues, allowing the fair's architects to drape classical grandeur over temporary frames. Chicago's climate posed a constant threat. Staff could hold up for a single season if kept dry and freshly painted, but rain, soot, and freeze-thaw cycles quickly revealed its limits. Maintenance crews worked continuously, patching cracks and repainting facades to keep the White City's gleam intact for visitors. Contemporary reports describe ongoing repairs and touch-ups throughout the fair's run, but no records confirm a strict repainting schedule. The evidence points to relentless upkeep, not permanent durability. Beneath the decorative skin, the real engineering feat was the manufacturers and liberal arts building. This structure stretched nearly 1,700 feet in length and 787 feet across, covering over 30 acres, an unprecedented scale for its time. Its central hall was roofed by iron and steel trusses, each spanning up to 150 feet between columns, forming a grid that supported the vast, barrel-vaulted ceiling. These trusses, fabricated by firms like Union Iron Foundry and American Bridge Works, were assembled on site and lifted into place by steam-powered hoists. The total clear span of 382 feet was achieved not by a single unsupported arch, but by a series of interconnected bays and columns, each engineered to handle the immense loads of roof and crowds. This method, using a steel skeleton, modular trusses, and staff cladding, mirrored advances seen in European exhibition halls and American railroad sheds. The underlying structure was robust, designed to last just long enough for the fair. The outer shell was spectacle, a thin, moldable, and ultimately disposable mask. What looked like marble Rome was, in reality, an industrial marvel dressed for a 6-month show. Charles Dudley Arnold, the official photographer of the World's Columbian Exposition, produced thousands of images, but only a small fraction capture the mess of construction, frames, scaffolds, or staff being applied. The vast majority show finished facades, grand vistas, and crowds moving through a city that seems complete and timeless. This wasn't an accident. The exposition company's publicity department pushed for a polished visual record, aiming to convince the world that Chicago had built a new Rome on the prairie. Private cameras were allowed only with a fee, keeping most amateur snapshots out of circulation. Today, less than a fifth of surviving photographs show any sign of work in progress. The official albums, widely distributed after the fair, reinforce this image, a marble metropolis, gleaming and eternal. That illusion extended into the night. The fair became a showcase for electric lighting on a scale never seen before. Westinghouse Electric, fresh from winning the contract over Edison's General Electric, installed an alternating current system that powered about 90,000 incandescent lamps. For visitors in 1893, the site was otherworldly, domes, arches, and fountains glowing against the dark, their outlines reflected in the Grand Basin. The fair's lighting was both a technical triumph and a marketing coup, cementing the future of AC power in American cities. Engineers worked up to the last minute, wiring circuits and testing generators so that the opening night would deliver on its promise of modernity. The illuminated spectacle left a lasting impression. Even the landscape played into the illusion of permanence. Frederick Law Olmsted's team transformed the marshy grounds by dredging lagoons and planting thousands of trees and shrubs. Many mature-looking trees in fair photographs weren't the result of decades of growth. They were transplanted specimens, brought in from nurseries around the Midwest, sometimes nearly 3,000 in all, chosen for their size and ability to survive the move. This practice, common in World's Fair design, created instant shade and the impression of an established park. In reality, the landscape was as carefully curated as the architecture and the lighting, a stage set built to impress, documented in images that left the chaos and improvisation behind the scenes. The result was a city that seemed a leap fully formed into existence, its modern infrastructure and classical lines captured for posterity. Yet behind every photograph, behind every glowing bulb and leafy avenue, were choices about what to show and what to hide. The fair closed its gates on October 30th, 1983. Within months, the White City began to vanish. Most buildings, never meant to last, quickly fell into decay. Salvage crews stripped iron, lumber, and fixtures as the grounds emptied. By the summer of 1984, the site was a patchwork of abandoned halls and scavenged frames. On July 5th, fire swept through the fairgrounds. Newspapers described flames tearing across the Court of Honor, fueled by dry timber and wind off the lake. Firefighters focused on containing the blaze, not saving structures that had already outlived their purpose. The disaster destroyed much of what remained, accelerating a process already underway. In the end, nearly all of the White City's grand facades were gone, dismantled, burned, or left to collapse. Only a handful of structures survived into the new century. The Palace of Fine Arts stood apart. Built with a brick and steel core to protect the art collections, it weathered the fire and decay better than its neighbors. For a time, it housed the Field Columbian Museum. By the 1920s, the building had deteriorated, its staff skin crumbling away. City permits from that era document a full reconstruction. The original brick core was kept, but the exterior was stripped and refaced in limestone, the structure upgraded to modern standards. The building reopened as the Museum of Science and Industry. What appears today as a seamless continuation from 1983 is, in fact, a careful replica in permanent materials, anchored on the footprint of the old palace. As the White City disappeared, a new story began to circulate. Enthusiasts pointed to the speed of demolition and the lone survivor, weaving them into a broader narrative. The word Tartaria entered the conversation, borrowed from old maps that labeled vast reaches of Asia as Tartary. Online, these labels were recast as signs of a lost civilization, its architecture erased by events like the World's Fair. The rapid erasure of Chicago's White City became, for some, evidence of a cover-up, but the records, fire dates, demolition contracts, building permits remain. The myth endures, shaped by what was lost, what survived, and what people want to believe about vanished worlds. In an era obsessed with lost secrets, real history leaves no shortcuts, only the hard work of sifting evidence from imagination. Today, the line between legend and record is thin. The truth isn't hidden, it's waiting in the archives for those willing to look. What will you find?